I think we'll be descending from a very eloquent English language to another level, but don't mind, we'll find a converging point. Christine has already explained the theories and concepts underlining our research. I will give a quick recap of the theories and then proceed with 2 other experiments, or 1, depending on the time. The whole research is being operated or manipulated under the broader umbrella of priming. And priming, as she explained, is the effect of a pre-exposed stimulus on the subsequent, on the response to a subsequent stimulus. Now, priming could be positive or negative, and positive priming is a faster response to an object that has been encountered previously. And negative priming is a slow reaction time, slowness in reaction to a stimulus that has been ignored previously. Actually, she explained 2 major theories of priming. And I will add here that many other theories have been espoused to explain the priming phenomenon. In case you stumble on another one, you say, oh, these people did not mention it. Yeah, we are actually focusing on these 2 because these are the 2 theories which have survived empirical testing. From the episodic retrieval perspective, positive priming is actually underpinned by 2 major factors. One is compatible response tag, and the second one is spreading activation. The basic idea there is that upon encounter with stimuli, targets and distractors are given memory tags or codes. So if it is an item of interest, it is given a response tag. If it's something that is not supposed to be responded to, or it's a distractor, it is given a do not respond tag. So if a response tag item is encountered in the subsequent trial, response is facilitated because of the response compatibility. Now, if a do not respond item is encountered on a subsequent trial, there is a delay in response because of the response incompatibility. In that one sense, the item is tagged do not respond, and it becomes relevant and gains a response tag in subsequent trial, and that creates conflict in memory. The time taken to resolve that conflict before a response can be issued is what causes negative priming. So that is for the episodic retrieval theory. Now, I have selective inhibition account 2. Basically, the idea behind the selective inhibition theory is that when you encounter stimuli in the environment, Christine was using words. Let me say, when you encounter words, both words are activated in parallel. And in order to respond to a target word, the distractor word has to be inhibited, and the activation level of the target has to be accelerated or increased in order for a response to be issued. Now, this target activation and distractor inhibition also spread to their related items. Let me give a quick example. Like you encounter a word like maybe hospital. It is likely to activate other words like nurse and doctor in memory. So if it is a distractor, the inhibition attached to it spreads to those words as well. If it's a target, the activation level of that stimulus or that word also spreads to its related words. So that is all about the theories. And for that matter, selective inhibition theory will predict positive priming in a situation whereby an item that is encountered once is seen again, or its related item is encountered on a subsequent trial. And negative priming is when an inhibited item or a word is encountered in a subsequent trial, or its related item is encountered. Now, we try to marry 2 major areas of research, that is bilingualism and this priming research. Actually, somebody may ask, what is the business with bilingualism and priming research, and who is a bilingual, what is a bilingual, and those questions. Well, I will start by indicating that a bilingual is someone who speaks 2 languages. It could be a combination of any 2 languages. It could be Maori and English. I speak Twi and English, some level of English, let me put it that way. So I can call myself a Twi English bilingual. And here you can see that what I'm going to discuss, all the research data were taken actually from Twi English bilinguals. And this Twi is a language spoken by people in Africa, Ghana. It may sound quite strange, maybe you might have heard of it before. It's a language that is spoken by about 90% of people in Ghana. So those were the people we took our data from. And those people also speak English as well. So they were Twi English bilinguals, just like myself. Now, one of the hot issues in bilingual research, or the major findings in current bilingual research, is that the two languages of the bilingual are activated in parallel, even when a bilingual decides to use one language alone. Now, let's take a picture, this diagram, for example. This is a Twi English speaker confronted with a naming task, that's picture naming task. The task of the participant here is to name this animal. If the requirement narrows down to naming the animal in maybe English, this word sheep will be articulated. If the requirement is to name the animal in Twi, the person will say Ojuan, which is the Twi word for sheep. Now, the idea here is bilingual research tells us that both languages are activated in parallel. So the question is, which mechanism enables bilinguals to articulate words in one language without influences from the other language? Let me bring it down to my level. At this point, I am speaking, delivering my seminar in English. The question is, which mechanism enables me to control influences of my Twi language at this point, such that there is no random errors? You can't be hearing Twi words in my delivery. So which mechanism is prevents interference from my Twi language to the English language at this point? So that is one question I would like us to explore here. And if there is time, I'll continue to also delve into how the languages of the bilingual are stored and represented in memory. All these questions that I've raised, we will attempt to answer them through positive and negative priming effects. And as Christine established earlier, sometimes some researchers tend to conclude that both theories make similar predictions, and for that matter, they are similar. I'll also try to use the findings here to disentangle the inhibition-based and episodic retrieval accounts of priming. Now, Christine has already thrown light on the methods we've been using in our studies. And basically, we use what we call the lexical decision and naming task. And as she explained, the task involved participants naming a word in prime trial and then making lexical decision to another word in subsequent trial. Usually, every trial came with a target and a distractor. In a way, the experiments were designed to approximate real-world processing. So we always had a target and a distractor in the prime, and then the target and the distractor also in the probe. So the subjects names the prime target word, and then in the subsequent trial, decides whether the word that follows is a real word or not. Actually, the first experiments I'm trying to present here was done in the Twi language, and I'll call it here a within language experiment. Within language means that all the words came from or were sought from one language. And the subjects were first presented with, they see a fixation cross, then there is a prime display of two words here. Then they see a blank screen for like 1,000 milliseconds, and there is a probe display also of two words. The target words were always written in smaller letters or lowercase letters, if I should put it that way. And in Kristen's presentation, she showed a first experiment where she had attended repetition and control condition, and another experiment where she had ignored repetition and control condition manipulations. Actually, in this experiment, 3 variables or the 3 constructs are manipulated in each study. Let me take the first, a sample of the first experiment, for example, here. You may not understand the language here, but at least you'll be able to follow me through the methods. Here we have the attended repetition condition. As Christine said, they see a word. The target word here is the same as the target word here. Although we don't understand the language, but at least you could see that the spellings here are the same. So this target is repeated as the target here. And we expect a speed up or facilitation because the word that is attended to in trial 1 becomes the same target word in trial 2. Now, in the control condition, all the 4 words are different. So this is always used as the yardstick or the benchmark for comparing whether there is positive or negative priming effect. So the difference between this and that should give you a positive figure, meaning there was a speed up in the attended repetition condition. In the ignored repetition condition, here again too, you may not understand the language, but you could see that the word here, the ignored word here, or the distractor word here, becomes the target word here. And so we expect that there will be a delay in response to this, the delay in response in this condition compared to this condition, whereby all the words are new. I will not really talk about the noun word just like Christian ignored it because we don't analyze the noun words, but it was part of the experiment. Now, in the within language experiment, both theories predict that there should be positive and negative priming effect. That is, there should be positive priming effect if the word seen in trial 1 becomes the target word again in trial 2. And they also predict that there should be negative priming effect if the ignored word in trial 1 becomes the target word in trial 2. The assumption is that the prime here, the probe here, retrieves the processes that took place in the prime. And that is why they both make similar predictions. Now, if you look at the results section, you could see that consistent with the assumptions by the 2 theories, the data here produces, there is a faster reaction time here compared to this one, the control condition, which means there was a positive priming effect in the within language experiment. And if you look at the ignored repetition and the control, you could see there was a significant difference in the IR and the CO, which also shows that there was a negative priming effect in the ignored repetition condition. Actually, this experiment is going to serve as a baseline for the next experiment, which I'm quite much interested in. The second experiment is a cross-language manipulation of the first experiment. By cross-language, I imply that in the first one, as I showed, they were responding to the task only in one language. By cross-language, they will juggle between 2 languages. The prime stimuli or the prime words are presented in their first language, that's the tree language. And then the probe target is presented in the English language, although the probe distractor is also in their first language. The basic task here is for the subject to name the prime target word here, which is in tree, and then makes lexical decision as to whether the next target that follows is a correct English word or not. So they are moving between 2 languages in a predictable sequence. First, they name a word in English, tree, and second, they make a lexical decision in the English language. Let's see a sample of how the manipulation was also done in this particular experiment. Again, we don't understand the language, but I will try to interact in such a way that we all be able to follow through. Now, in the attended repetition condition, the word here, the target word here, and this word are the same. They are the same in this sense, not the same that they possess the same physical characteristics or spellings, but at the conceptual level, they are the same. In the attended repetition, the target word in the probe is a translation equivalent of the target word in the prime. So it's the same manipulation, but still they are moving between 2 languages. So they name the target word here and then decide whether this word is a correct English word or not. So I can do a quick translation. This word means waves. This word could be translated as faith. This is waves, which is the English word, and this is market. Now, in the control condition, all the 4 words are different. I can do a quick translation, this could be translated as leaf. This is leprosy, and then the English word, which is pencil, and then this is punishment. So all the 4 words are different. Again, this will be used as a benchmark to test whether positive priming is achieved or not. In the ignored repetition condition, the target word here is the translation equivalent of the prime distractor. So the prime distractor, this word is prison in the English language, and then prison comes here as a target. So the word they ignore in their first language becomes the target word which they have to decide on in the prime display. And here too, I wouldn't actually concentrate on the noun word because we don't analyze the noun words. Now, what do these 2 theories predict in the cross-language experiment? In the within language experiments, they made similar predictions. What about the cross-language experiments? Now, the episodic retrieval theory, as indicated earlier, claims that positive priming should be, positive and negative priming will be achieved in the cross-language experiment, but perhaps reduced. Let me throw light on the perhaps reduced here. This is dealing with mental tags, a response tag which is relevant, a distractor tag which is irrelevant, and giving do not respond tag. Now, the items are saved as episodes in memory. If the, let me probably show the example. Yeah. If this word here becomes the next word here, it will still get a response tag because they are the same. And I mentioned earlier that they are the same at the conceptual level. But because their physical features have been tempered with, it will not be a very good retrieval cue for this one. Like this word is a tree word. This is an English word. They are the same, and they are, from episodic retrieval perspective, they will elicit similar tags. But the magnitude of positive priming you may get here will not be as much as you get in the reading language experiment, because here the physical characteristics of the word has been tempered with. Now, in the more or less this in the ignored repetition condition too, they will make similar prediction. The ignored word here is the same as the target word here. So they will get similar tags and elicit response incompatibility, which will create negative priming effects. But because, again, the physical characteristics of the word, which is an important attribute in episodic retrieval, has been tempered with, the level of negative priming you will gain here will not be as robust as in within language experiment. Now, let's look at the predictions by the episodic retrieval, the inhibition-based theory. This theory predicts that there should be a dissociation between positive and negative priming effects across languages. I will probably take this step by step. In the inhibition-based account, I explained earlier that when the words are encountered, both the target and the distractor are activated in parallel. Then the distractor has to be inhibited before a response could be given to the target. So I would say that inhibition of the distractor is a byproduct of selectively attending to a target here. Now, I've shown in the text earlier that they are moving in a regularly alternating sequence. They know, the subjects are aware that the first task is to name a word in my first language, which is tree language, and then make a lexical decision to a word in the second language, which is the English language. Because of this idea, because they are aware of the order of languages, it is possible that once they have named the prime target, this prime language will have to be inhibited because they are aware the next task is going to be done or conducted in English. So keeping the tree language active could be potentially interfering with making lexical decision to this probe target item. For that matter, the tree language is likely to be inhibited. if the whole language, the tree language is inhibited, then the spreading activation and spreading inhibition idea I expressed earlier is likely not to play here, because this word is supposed to pre-activate its translation equivalent in the other language. However, the whole language system is suppressed once naming has been achieved. And suppression of this language means that this language spreading activation from the L1 word here will not be able to operate towards the L2 word here, because the whole language system has been suppressed. And so it will more or less be like a control condition. All the words will be neutralized and become like a control condition. Let me also talk about the ignore repetition condition. So one, I will say that the inhibition-based theory will not predict positive priming in this circumstance, because all the words will neutralize up and there will not be any spreading activation here. But then I also mentioned earlier that this spreading activation and inhibition operates depending on whether it is a target or a distractor. Now, this word is ignored. It's a distractor word. This is a target word. Another way of inhibition is that during naming of this target word, the distractor word will have to be inhibited or suppressed, because I mentioned earlier that the two are activated in parallel. So to be able to name this one has to be inhibited before this one can be named. Now, inhibition of this word at the selective level, you are selectively inhibiting a particular word, will then spread to its translation equivalent in the other language, such that if that word becomes the next probe target requiring lexical decision, the response will be delayed. I think there is a bit confusing here if I must repeat myself. In attended repetition, a whole language system is going to be suppressed. It doesn't mean that there is no inhibition. There is inhibition of this word when the subject is naming the target word. And also, there is a second step in inhibition, whereby a whole language will have to be inhibited so that the subject can make lexical decision to a language which is upcoming. Now,
I think there might be a class coming soon, so can you maybe move to the result?
Yeah. Okay. So so that's the manipulation we did here, and then you see that if you move to the results section, you could see that the attended repetition and the control show no significant difference, and the control and the ignored repetition still seems to be showing some difference. So it implies that positive priming here has been eliminated, but negative priming actually remains intact in this section. And this actually is consistent with the inhibition-based account, whereby I stated earlier that they will predict a dissociation between the two, predicting no negative priming effect, but positive priming effect in the negative priming effect in the ignored repetition, but no positive priming effect in the attended repetition condition. Now, let me move to the implications of this to the inhibition-based account. First, the result tells us that selective attention or bilingual language selection is achieved by a system of active inhibition, such that I posed an earlier question: which mechanism enables one to speak in one language without interference from the other language? So it implies that for us to be able, or maybe for me to be able to speak in one language, the other language has to be inhibited. And two, it also shows that inhibition can operate at two levels. At the first level, as I showed, is a local level whereby a particular word has to be inhibited in order to make naming or to name another word. And at the global level, whereby a whole language system has to be inhibited so that another task could be performed in another language. The results are, however, inconsistent with the episodic retrieval theory, whereby they predicted both positive and negative priming effects, perhaps reduced in that circumstance. But then you realize there is a dissociation between positive and negative priming effect. There is negative priming effect, but no positive priming effect. That makes it very difficult for this theory to handle the findings here. I would say that I don't really mean to discount the potency of the theory, of the other theory, that is the episodic theory, in explaining other results. But in the present circumstance, I think it finds it difficult to accommodate the findings we got here. Thank you very much.
negative priming or priming effects generally, if the English were presented first and then the Twi second? Because in your experiment, you used the Twi words were the prime, had the priming effects on the responses to the English words. What happens if you do it the other way?
Yeah, I have an experiment where the languages were swapped and the results also changed. So in that sense, we got positive priming effects, but the negative priming effects were eliminated. Oh, so yeah, and that was, I also explained that from a different perspective, looking at the strength of the languages. So a weaker language, and because here they are dealing with a stronger language, that's their first language, to their second language. And in what you are talking about, from the people I tested, they were dealing with their second language to the other language. So I explained it from the language, the strength of the language perspective.
Does that mean that they're not stored together then, in that sense? I mean, wouldn't the first language might be stored differently from the second language, or
okay?
Or might there be a difference? I mean, if you had a bilingual from birth, so someone who learned two languages from birth, would they show negative priming effects going both ways, or would it just depend on which language was stronger? Yeah,
from your first question, as I've explained earlier, the results change. There is a difference between the strength of the language and the time that the individual also started learning the language. I actually have an experiment whereby we split the groups into fluent and less fluent bilinguals, and realize that the idea of inhibition actually has to do with the strength of the language, I mean the potency of the individual's ability in speaking the language, because the more proficient bilinguals showed negative priming effects, but the less proficient bilinguals tended towards positive priming. That also took me back to the strength of the language idea, whereby we state that when less proficient bilinguals seems to rely on their second language to process their first language. So there was some kind of, even when they have to inhibit the language, it is not possible in their sense, because when they have to perform a task in the English language, they will still have to lean back to their first language. And so the language will still be kept active, and that causes positive priming in that regard. Yeah, but the more proficient bilinguals are able to inhibit a whole language system when they know that the task for the upcoming task is in the other language, because they don't need it again. Yeah. Yeah.
What about more than two languages? How do you maybe two languages?
Okay, well, I think that is one of my future plans, to move into 3 languages and see. These people were purely bilinguals, people who have no other knowledge about no other language apart from English and Twi. So that's a good idea. I want to move further step and see how trilinguals will behave, and when they know more other languages, if the results will be different. Yeah.
Did you control the length of words between the two languages? So if a word in English only had 4 letters and the Twi word had 7 letters between conditions?
Yeah, that control was highly impossible in this regard. The Twi language is a funny language. Sometimes Twi is actually, some Twi words are derived from the English word. So sometimes the translation is a whole sentence. We have a word like hospital. I think hospitals were built after colonial rule. So hospital is translated as Ayaresabea, and Ayare means sickness treatment place. And it's a whole word in the Twi language. So you barely can't control the words. Yeah, you couldn't control the length of the words. But approximately all of them were within 3 to 17 letters. Yeah. Yes, please.
In your current experiment, the bilingual one, only the probe target is English, or the other 3 were Twi, right? I'm wondering if, let's say, you have the probe target and you have the prime target also English. So they're always responding to English in both the prime and the probe task. Do you think your results will differ? So I'm thinking of more in terms of global inhibition and the local inhibition and the activation level. So they're always responding to English. The distractor is always Twi.
No, I have another experiment. I conducted a series of experiments, so I will be saying I have another experiment. Yeah, I had like 8 experiments. One of them was actually after I had gotten this resource, I tried to test whether global inhibition was actually motivated by having the probe distractor in the first language, just like the prime, and it didn't make any difference. The results were the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I would think by currently, the tree will be more activated in the prime chart because they have this buffer tree, right? And so you might be the inhibition. You might need to have a stronger inhibition to tree when you come to English. So you might get a stronger negative prime effect. But if you don't find any difference.
Yeah, we don't find anything. That also raises questions to whether they don't really pay attention to the distractor. That's what it also implies, because the distractor, when you change the language of the distractor, it doesn't really make any difference. I mean, for the probe, for the prime, I've already tested it, but for the probe, when you change the language of the probe distractor, it doesn't make any difference in the results. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm indicated. Yeah.
Any more questions? I have a question for Kristen.
Sit down now.
You kept mentioning that you thought that the distractor in the prime was an implicit memory. What gives you, what is your logic for saying that that's an implicit memory necessarily and not an explicit kind of a memory?
So at the end of the first experiment, we had a catch trial on the last trial. So there was a normal prime display presented, and participants, then a blank screen came up, and I asked the participants what the prime distractor was in the previous trial, and they couldn't answer me. Then a list of 3 words came up on the screen, and I asked them to choose which of the 3 words was the prime distractor. So in the first experiment, we did find that more than what would be expected by chance, we're actually able to recognize the word. So that was a little bit concerning, but because all the 3 words were very different, I thought it's quite possibly kind of like a perceptual effect. They've picked up on some kind of tick marks from the distractor that's just made them just guess the right one. So in the second experiment, I redesigned the catch trial. So they had the normal prime display, and then they had a list of 5 words that all began and ended with the same letters as the distractor. Now, under these conditions, they could not recognize the prime distractor, which led me to think they didn't have any explicit identification of it.
Very good. Thank you. Any more questions?
Well, when I was thinking about the language thing, and if the 2 languages are too close, let's say, because the 2 ones you compare are structurally different, I think. So let's say if you use 2, probably you don't know yet, but it will be interesting to see 2 close structurally and grammatically related languages. Maybe the inhibition will be harder to achieve. Or I will say, because in my personal experience, I have gone through that. So it is difficult. It is difficult when they are very close grammatically. So I don't know, it's an idea.
Yeah. I actually don't know languages that are very close, but I've read literature about languages that share similar spelling names and non-cognate and those things. And I think they fairly produce similar pattern of results. Yeah. And even when the languages are also very diverse, like in my case, if you have the Chinese writing and English, they fairly produce similar pattern of results. You know, on the other hand, if you have languages like, which language I use very close? Maybe Spanish and English. I think Spanish and English must be close.
No, I was speaking, in my case, I went to speak Italian and Spanish, so that's very close. And
okay.
actually, there are words that are the same writing but mean different things. So it's like very tricky. I even not less than Portuguese and Spanish, which sometimes it's pointless to speak, to try to learn that either of, because, well, I don't want to sound offensive. That for them, I think, is that we are speaking bad Portuguese, and for us, they're speaking back Spanish. So it's like so close. Like I know it's like I think it's harder when they're so close. Your mind is more confused. The English.
Yeah, I understand what you are saying. If they are too close, you may not be able to input in an experiment like this. Because if the word becomes ignored, or if it becomes a non-word, the candidates may not be able to identify. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. Maybe you can also help us to design another experiment tailored around what you are. if you can help us in that regard. Okay.
Yeah, in the future.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.